Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small businesses and good stories in general. Welcome to today's episode of Small Business War Stories. And today I sat down with Britton Byfield, who is the founder and principal of Lucktone Woodshop in Austin, Texas. And he does custom wood fabrication, and his story was really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One is that he had an office job before, but he always knew that his passion was woodworking. So we talk about what it took for him to step out on his own and take that step, what the catalyst was, and how he handled all of that. The other thing that we talked about that is something that I've been trying to explore a lot more recently in our episodes is the mental health aspect of starting a small business, of entrepreneurship. How do you deal with anxiety, with uncertainty, with all of the really tough mental challenges that you face when you set out on your own? So we definitely address that, and I learned some insights from Britton, and I think you will as well. The one thing I want to ask you today is, if you enjoy this episode, please share it with one person. Just one person. Text them, send them the link, be like, hey, maybe somebody interested in woodworking or in small businesses or in mental health, and send them a message and let them know about Small Business War Stories. Our listeners are our biggest ambassadors, so thank you for doing that. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Britton Byfield of Lucktone Woodshop in Austin, Texas. And we are live here in beautiful Austin, Texas. And today I have the pleasure and honor to sit down with Britton Byfield, who is the proprietor and founder of Lucktone Woodshop.
What's going on? Thanks for having me here.
Of course, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah,
it's really cool. We met originally at Fine Lumber, which is an establishment here in Austin, because I was trying my hand at making my own desk, which was, and you recognized my lost puppy face, and you're like, oh, let me help this guy out.
I basically live up at Fine Lumber. Eric, who helped you out, they're great people up there. So that will be my big shout out to them. He's really great, and he helps me out a ton. So I try to pay it back in ways I can.
Yeah,
so,
you have a lot of expertise and a lot of tools and knowledge of how to use those tools that I don't have.
And we have a mutual, likeness of music. So we kind of got along like that. So I was happy to help out and not charge you anything. Right?
Sounds good, man. I really, really appreciate it.
For sure.
Well, I'll pay you back by setting up your guitar like we talked about before.
There we go.
So let's talk about Lucktone. What, first of all, how did you get into woodworking? You told me before that you had done some other things before that were pretty different.
Yeah. So, kind of going way back, my grandfather, I grew up on a farm in Taylor, which is like 40 miles northeast of here.
Yep. And
my grandfather was a farmer. He built the homes they lived in. He could fix anything. He could build anything. He could make, anything. He was very resourceful. And so he was always in the shop. And so I kind of grew up around it. And my dad as well is a really talented woodworker. And he never did it professionally, but I grew up around it. My dad had a shop. He gave me a lot of his tools later in life. But it was something I never really did growing up. I remember like building little skateboard ramps, and I made hockey sticks to with my rollerblades. I go ride around in circles in a garage. And
my first ever project was actually, I used to work at a hockey rink, and it was a bunch of broken hockey sticks that I cut up and turned into like a basket.
Well, it's funny because these hockey sticks I made were literally like a piece of 1x2, and then I think I had some trim or something that I cut with a handsaw, and I sandwiched it together, and then that was it. It was not
no curve, right?
No, nothing. But it was fun, and I wasn't hitting any sort of puck. It was just like a tennis ball or something.
Yeah.
So I can remember that being like my first real venture into woodworking. So I grew up around it, and I guess through osmosis or something, it just kind of, I took it all in, and then about, like I was telling you, 5 or 6 years ago, I bought an old 1950s camper. Years before that, my wife and I went out to El Cosmico and in Marfa and stayed in one of the campers.
I've actually never been there. I've heard
it's
a lot
really
about
cool.
it. Okay.
It's, you know, I'm sure it's so much different now. I know it's so much different now, even in the last 6 years. But so that just like, I got the bug and I started scouring Craigslist, and eventually I found a camper and I bought it. And it, unbeknownst to me, needed a lot of work. I didn't know what I was looking for when I bought it. And I remember one night I woke up in the middle of the night after I had just had it for probably 2 months. It was raining outside, and I'm pretty anxious. I've got a better hold on it now than I used to, but I just woke up in like a daze, and I ran out to the camper, and it's pouring down rain, and I just ripped off a piece of paneling on the inside. I don't know why. And sure enough, water was just pouring in.
Oh.
So I was like, shoot.
No, you can cuss. You can do it. We'll just mark it.
Just
as
making sure.
Yeah.
I won't cuss a lot, but
Yeah.
So I pulled the panels back and was like, man, there's so much water damage. It's rotting. And, 60 years old, you're going to find some of that.
Yeah.
So I started tearing it apart. And that was about when my dad would come in and help me, and kind of, because I didn't know what I was.
Yeah.
I kind of did, but I didn't really know
Yeah.
what I was getting into. And so, and I don't think he did either, but he at least knew how to use the tools and what to go buy, and we could just kind of figure it out. So that's what we did. We tore it apart, fixed it. He gave me his old Craftsman table saw from the 70s or 80s, whenever he bought it. And that was my first real big tool. And then I started kind of collecting other tools. And then I got really into it. And when I was working at a software company doing marketing and video production. And
pretty different.
Yeah. Well, you think so, but to me, everyone always asks, what's like your passion and what's your hobby? And I was like, well, is it music? Is it woodworking? Well, I realized like I love making things. Mm-hmm. It could be making dinner, it could be making, maybe not the bed. My wife would agree with, I don't like doing that, but, writing a song or playing music, it's all like you have all these tools, and you start with something raw, whether it be a riff or a piece of wood or ingredients for a recipe, and then you make it and you finish it and you consume it, or you see it, or you hand it to a client, and then you reflect on it. So I kind of saw that as video for my video work. Same thing. I had the tools. I had this raw footage I would shoot. I would edit it. I would re-edit it. I'd hand it over to a client. I'd make changes. Yeah. Polish it, and then that was it.
Wow.
So different in the sense of the end product, but to me the process was always the same. And so I realized I was passionate about just making things. And so woodworking just happened to be one of those things where a very tangible result you get from all these different aspects of it. And so when I was working at a software company, doing marketing and video production, I started taking woodworking classes at ACC. Mm-hmm. And they have
that's the community college.
Yeah, Austin Community College. And they have a really awesome shop, and really, really great teachers. And if you're a Travis County or Austin resident, it's really cheap to take classes. So I would take them from like 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. twice a week, or whatever the schedule was. But you were usually in the shop for about 5 hours, at least once or twice a week. And that's where I kind of learned a lot of what I do. And so then, again, I'm long-winded, like I told you.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
It's a long way to where we are now. But I was taking the second woodworking class at ACC, and I got laid off from the software company. Mm-hmm. I was kind of expecting it. The company was kind of going up and down, and I was a nice to have, but I knew like I wasn't a vital piece of the company. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of, to be honest, over it. I found my wife was going through a box a couple days ago, and she found our written vows from our wedding. Mm-hmm. And this was before I got laid off and when I was still working there. And at the bottom of the page, it said, in and if you want to quit your job and become a full-time woodworker, I'll be supportive of you and be there for you. And she has been the whole time.
Yeah. So you called upon that. And you're like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot. Sorry, honey. I forgot about it. Right.
Yeah.
And then when we found it, I was like, man, it's funny how that worked out.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I got laid off during, it was like in October, November, right before the holidays. It's really tough to find a job.
Yeah.
Right then. And so to try to make some money to make sure we paid our mortgage, and again, thankfully I have an employed wife who is incredibly supportive. I started making like cutting boards and like wooden utensils and cheese boards, and I sold them, and I sold every one I made. And so that was like, okay, cool. There's some potential here to kind of take these skills and just make money from it, until I find my next thing. So I interviewed for jobs, and none of them kind of worked out. And then I had the opportunity to start working for an architect in town. Thought Barn is the firm. And I was working on a house where we took off the second story, or the roof, and added a second story. And I got to work with a couple of really great guys, Connor Finn and Jimmy Rittenberry. And it was like the perfect situation for me to start doing what I did. It was my apprenticeship, basically.
Yeah. How long ago was this? It will be 3 years, I believe, in January when I started that. Yeah. How did you feel? I mean, I think a lot of our listeners are either running small businesses, or they're in a job that they don't particularly love doing, figuring out what they're going to do. What were the feelings that you had at the time?
Well, like I said, I was kind of expecting it, and I was ready. I thought I was ready for it, but it still hurt like a bitch when I got laid off.
Yeah.
Like you're wondering about your self-worth, and like, okay, well now what? My mortgage isn't going to stop hitting every month, but the money is going to stop until I find something. And so it was really tough at the beginning. Even though it was what I thought I wanted to do, you're basically starting over again.
Yeah.
And so it was tough at the beginning, but again, having a supportive wife and supportive family and everyone around me encouraging me, and having some quick results of doing something I liked. And when you enjoy something and are passionate about it, you don't have to make a ton of money, but it's nice to see a return on it, right? So
how did you sell those first few boards? Like, how did you find those customers?
I think I made it my website, and either had an Etsy store or something along the lines.
So these are not people whom you knew?
No, it was. So then most of it I just posted on my own social media, my personal one. And during all of this, I started like a Instagram page for Lucktone and a Facebook page, and I would just, blast out on my own personal page and link it. And so I just, I think they were all either friends or family that bought the first, 30 of them I made. Sure. But that's, I don't think they were pitying me. Maybe some of them were, but I think they genuinely were excited and liked it, and it was cool. And it also, people like handmade things. You don't see it enough these days. Or
so what's the importance of, handmade objects in a, factory-made world?
I think that, to me, the biggest thing and the biggest part that I provide in what I do is, say you want something specific for an area of your house, right? And you can't find it. There's millions and millions of options out there, but none of them are just right? Every house is different. Everyone's style is a little bit different. So I think the value that I bring is not only I care about it, there's quality there. I try to locally source things, and but I also can build you exactly what you want, right? And I've moved further away from doing like cutting boards and that sort of thing, which were fun. But I wanted to do more custom, bigger work. And I realized that from a business perspective, that made more sense, and there was more opportunities out there for me to make money doing that sort of thing.
So what was that ramp? I mean, how do you go from making cutting boards to making, like, right now you have some project, I mean, some, huge, beautiful tables, and you have like full on cabinetry and, all kind of kitchens. And
Yeah. I can't remember what the first like real one I made. I think that I started, if you walk in my house, I think I've counted before, I think I have 12 tables in my house. Some, the most shitty, like Craig screwed, which there's nothing wrong with Craig screws. I want to say that, like pocket holes. But like the first ones I did, and I still keep them there, and it's kind of a, I can look back and say, oh man, you've gotten better. Mm-hmm. And I go to our bedroom, and I've got 2 nicer side tables there. And then I go to the front room, and I've got a coffee table and another little side table. And then we go to the back room, and there's a live edge table in there that, so I think I started making them for myself. And then I had some people say, hey, can you build this? And even though I hadn't built it,
yeah,
I've always had the mentality of like, I can figure it out.
Yep.
And so that's really how it transitioned. And I had some cool opportunities when I was working for the architect. We jumped around and worked on projects for places like Gorilla Suit and Bunkhouse, who owns El Cosmico, and those hotels, like Hotel St. Cecilia, and got to work and do some cabinetry and casework for them. And so I had the support of some really talented people around me to not only design, but help give me pointers and tips on how to do it.
Yep.
And so the more and more you do anything, the more you learn about it and the better you get. And so I feel like that happened with everything I made. And I still feel like I learn something every time I build, especially a cabinet. It just kind of snowballed, and then I realized I really like making those things. I mean, I used to think I wanted to do fine woodworking, and that's what my shirt says, and that's what my stickers say. But I realized, like,
what's the difference? Like, how do you define that difference?
It's much more traditional, right? It's a lot of hand tools. It's hand chiseling out dovetails and cutting dovetails. It's very, very just, there's just a lot more time and effort, and this makes me sound lazy, but that was more of a hobby to me, and like spending that time. Whereas again, from a business perspective, I had to make things that I could sell and make, a profit on. Yeah. Versus something like a small box that's really intricate, or it's got a lot of work into it. Well, I can't sell that for as much of the time I put into it or the effort.
Right. You got to keep your throughput high.
Exactly. So and I just enjoyed, I don't know, the increasing my output and building bigger things. And I just kind of gravitated towards that. And then just those jobs, people kept asking me, and I would bid them. And that's really cool. And I still do smaller projects, but I really don't do that too much anymore.
Cool. So now most of your work is, larger, and you're working mostly with the architects. How do you source most of your stuff today?
So very rarely I do work with architects still if there's a design. I mean, I prefer, what I do is I'll go into a house, or I'll go to a client who's reached out to me and say, hey, I'm interested in having this closet built out. Yep. So I'll go over to their home, take my little sketchbook, and I'll look at the closet. I'll get some measurements, and they'll either send me some ideas or something that they have. Yeah. And then I'll do like a rough sketch in my book just to see if it's kind of what they're wanting. And then I'll take it home, and then I'll build it in like SketchUp and get a 3D model of it on the computer and send it to them that way. And then, so most of the work goes like that. I still do, I'll work with I've been working on a remodel for a while, and there's a designer on that, and she'll design something, and then I just have the specs to design it or to build it. Mm-hmm.
So you also do general contracting too, right?
I do. And I do enjoy that too. I've managed remodels. I do trim carpentry and and stuff like that, again, to kind of fill in the voids to pay the bills. And I do enjoy that. There's so much of that in Austin right now. The opportunity to flip houses, to GC, to just do renovations in general is really high, and a lot of people want it. So that's a big part of my business as well now, is doing that kind of side of things.
And have you thought about, so right now it's just you and your business.
Yep.
Have you thought about adding more folks to be able to broaden the scope of what you can do?
Yeah. I mean, I do occasionally, I'll hire like a contract out some of the guys that I've worked with that I trust and I like working with. And,
right.
'Cause we're all the same, we all have, like I said, the gig economy. We're all taking jobs if we need them and kind of jumping out and about. So I will pick up people every now and then when I absolutely need help. Okay. I would like to expand. I'm looking to get a bigger shop space because I've been working out of our garage and our 1960s house. It's a small single car garage that I've maximized. And in the summer in Texas, as you are well aware, it's so hot. I don't want to open up my garage. I have a window unit in there and I can keep it like 80 degrees.
Yeah. Which is warm.
Is warm, I guess, but to me it's a little chilly.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't want to open the garage door because all that heat comes in and the sun. It's really hard to work in my little shop.
Yeah.
Especially building the bigger stuff. When I'm making smaller stuff, it's perfect.
Yeah.
But the more and more I do the bigger cabinetry and stuff, I can't do much there.
Right.
And therein comes Fine Lumber again, where they're great up there. And if I need to store something for a little bit or use one of their bigger tools, they're just really great people up there. So that's kind of extended my ability to have a small space and still stay small. But ideally, I would love to get a bigger space. Maybe if I can hire someone to kind of help do some of the things that either I don't have the time or, I can't take a job because I can't do that work. Yeah. And then take that on, or I'm 2 months out because it's a lot of work for one person. Yeah. So ideally, I would continue to expand and be able to hire somebody. And so that is a goal, hopefully in the next year or so. And I may pivot a little bit too and focus more on flipping houses and renovating but then I think the value I add to that is, well, I can build all the cabinets. I mean, you get a cabinet bid for a kitchen and a couple rooms and it's $25,000. Wow. If it's finished. And if I'm doing it for a flip or for a client and I can do it in house, I can save, a lot of money for the budget and do something I enjoy and still get paid for it. Yeah. And save a client money. So so we'll see kind of how the business, and that's why I'm kind of hesitant to get a rent out a space because I don't know. Yeah.
You're still figuring shit out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty common, I would say.
Yeah. So, but at the same thing, it's like when I didn't start this until I was fired, right? Or laid off. I wasn't fired. I need to make that clear. So if I don't kind of take the leap and maybe get a bigger space, I might not expand because of that. Now, if I take the leap and then that may open up more opportunities and give me more, it will give me more, just everything. So it's hard to.
I should connect you with, there's a couple folks in New Orleans, GoodWood, Nola, that have become good friends of mine. Mike and Jordan, and they have been on the podcast twice, and they have expanded. They have a custom furniture fabrication business, and they do a lot of this kind of stuff, and they've expanded a couple times. Yeah. So I'm sure.
Yeah, very cool. I remember you mentioning that. I haven't listened to those podcasts. You need to send them over.
Yeah, I'll send you
it's cool to see, and Austin has a lot of those places too. Those kind of craft studios, if you will, that kind of do a little bit of everything, that aren't just a cabinet shop or and it's cool to see that kind of, I don't know, it's a lot of people like me who maybe went to college, had a different job in a different industry, and like just said, enough is enough. I want to work with my hands or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And went and did it. I've got so many friends that hate their jobs and they have a passion for something else, and I get why they don't want to let it go, because it's easy. It's you get in routines, it's comfortable, you've got a check coming in, insurance. But I have to say I'm a lot more happy and doing something I enjoy. It's a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Running your own business is tough.
Yeah.
Dealing with the taxes and insurance and all of that stuff. It's not fun, but it's really not that bad either.
Yeah.
I was so scared of that, and I get stomach aches thinking about, oh gosh,
Yeah.
my taxes are coming up. And then I finally realized, like, no, there's an app for that. You can just,
Yeah.
you can keep all this, just keep the money, be smart with it. And it's doable.
Yeah. How do you deal with it? So this is something that's come up in the podcast a few times, like that you mentioned anxiety and thinking about, like, the mental health side of this. A lot of times people who do go out on their own, in many ways, I think there's a lot of overlapping with people who also deal with that. I certainly have dealt with anxiety issues in the past. What are the things that, and you mentioned that you had learned how to manage that a little bit better. What are the tools and what are the things that you have found work for you for that?
Yeah. So this is something that I think I wish more, and maybe it's a generational thing, I wish more people would be open about and talk about it, because like you said, most of us deal with it in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And I'm married to a therapist, so it opened up my eyes to a lot of, things with that. So I started seeing a therapist when things got really tough for me, and I was feeling depressed, and I wasn't getting all the work yet, or I wasn't making enough money, or I didn't know, all those stressors that came with it were just getting me really down. So I went to see a therapist, and it may or may not have helped me because of the certain therapist I had, but I went to the doctor, I got on some medicine, and it just helped really kind of help me, my body, like the physical feelings, just kind of step back from it and understand it and get a hold of it. Because, when you let anxiety or something like that take over, it can just take over your life, and you can't do anything. You can't.
Yeah, you can freeze up.
Right. And so being married to a therapist, I understood more of those options that I never really knew of growing up. Our families talked about it a little bit, but it was one of those, like, just toughen up, you're okay, And I realized, no, it's
sometimes okay not to be okay.
Exactly. And there is like it's a sickness just like any other thing. You have to acknowledge it. You have to seek out some sort of help, whatever that may be, just like you would take, Advil for a headache, or you'd put a cast on a broken arm. Your mind is the same way. You've got to take care of it. And you can't just say, you know what, I'm going to get over this. This is silly for me to worry about. No, none of it's silly to worry about.
Yeah.
And one of the other ways that helped me too was I worked, he helped me out yesterday. My good buddy Connor helped me realize, especially in the field I am in right now, unless you just royally fuck something up, most things have a fix. Right. And, especially going back to the fine woodworking side, I would like going from that to framing a house, something you'll never see, but is integral into the structure of the home. It's the only way it stays up. Right. Yeah. I realized I was sweating little things like, ooh, that's off 1/16 of an inch, and being really worried about it and letting myself feel sick for it, for these little things. And realizing, no, okay, there's a happy medium there of not being careless, but also not beating yourself up.
Yeah.
So I found that middle ground, that it's not worth, if I'd build a tabletop for somebody and my glue joint somewhere was a little off, but only I could see it. Just like you were showing me your table earlier, and you're like, oh, this this one little thing is off. I'm like, well,
You
I would have never
probably,
seen it.
Yeah.
And I do this professionally, and I would have said, all right, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I would feel good to hand this over to a client. And so,
well, that's a huge compliment. Thank you.
yeah. So it's, but you have to learn it, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to, the first things I built, I was like, man, that's a piece of shit. I can't. And then I would also, another thing I would tell the client when I ever hand it, I'm like, well, this thing is, this is out of square by, about a 64th of an inch, but it's over 54 inches. So and I had a guy say, hey, don't tell them that. They don't know it, like and you got to realize, especially a house, nothing is plumb, nothing is square, nothing is straight, that's just the real world, And an architect gives you plans, a computer's perfect, the real world's not. Yeah. So you adjust. And so I had to realize that imperfection is kind of a good thing, and that goes back to your question about handmade versus factory. I'm not a machine, there are going to be flaws, but instead of seeing them as flaws, I see them as characteristics. Yeah. Or unless it's just blatant, like I had to remake 3 cabinet doors yesterday because they didn't stain right the first 3. And instead of trying to fix them, I knew I would save time, money, headache just to rebuild them. Yeah. And I just rebuilt them. And
sometimes just got to eat crow.
Yeah. It just, you might have to spend a little more money or lose a little bit of money. And but that's how it goes.
I think it's important to recognize those things in yourself. And also one of the things that I found, the things that work for me are meditation. Meditation's a huge, huge deal, and journaling and working out. Yeah. And for me, the big thing is the work is never done. Like you're never fixed, quote unquote. Like stuff works as long as you keep having the discipline to meditate, to journal, to work out. But it's not just like, oh, I did that for 6 months, or I did that for 2 years, and now I'm fixed. Right. And that's when it comes back and hits you the hardest. Right. So it's like the work is never done.
I definitely agree. And on top of the other things about like seeing a therapist and stepping back, same thing. I play basketball probably 3 times a week. Yeah. I had this conversation with a buddy yesterday. We had a game, and whenever you have a hard day or you're going through something, I can go out there and play basketball, and I just kind of forget everything else that's going on. Mm-hmm. It's the best like mental just shut down I can have. And it's important. And when you're feeling anxious or depressed or whatever, it's really hard to motivate yourself to go out there and do that. Yeah. Even though you might know it's going to help, but it's just getting there. Yeah. So it's pushing through that and doing those things that you enjoy. And woodworking to me is one of those things. On the weekends, I'm still in my shop. I will take breaks, but if I'm not working on a project in my own house, I'm just fixing a tool in the shop. I'm taking something apart. I'm trying to make my shop more efficient. I'm trying to clean up because, if you don't continue to clean up, that's another thing. I feel a lot less motivated when I have a dirty shop.
That's true. And actually, there's a great analogy there for meditation, because there's a guy named Bernie Glassman who is a Zen Buddhist who wrote a book called Instructions to the Cook. And he did this. He built this amazing bakery in New York. The story's beyond the scope of this, but he draws the analogy that meditating is like cleaning the kitchen. Yep. So you cook, and you live your life, and when you cook, things get dirty, and you clean them. And meditation is the equivalent of cleaning your own mental kitchen.
Running the dishwasher. Yeah.
It's like or wiping the counters. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's cleaning the counters. It's drying those dishes. It's doing all that, and that's what meditation does. Is it cleans. And guess what? Again, the work's never done, because tomorrow
it's going to get dirty again.
You cook again, and you meditate again.
Totally. I think that's a very, very accurate analogy, and it plays out in my shop when it's dirty and I don't have the motivation. I just have to go out there and clean it, and then when it's clean, I love being out there. Yeah. I love But
if you're anything like me, then you start leaving screws on the side. I'll get back to this. Oh, this pile of parts over here belongs to this one guitar. And it's like,
exactly. My shop is never clean. Yeah. Maybe to the general definition of clean. Yeah. but it's one of those things. I know where everything is.
Yep, exactly.
But I can't ever find anything. So
exactly. So what's your vision? You're kind of at a crossroads right now, right, with your business. And by the way, before I forget, what was the origin of the name Lucktone?
So my wife and I are very much dog people, and we have 2 sweet puppy dogs, Lucky and Tony, that we adopted. Lucky about 7 years ago, and Tony we've had him for like 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're great, they're crazy, but it was really easy when I was trying to think of a name. I was like, oh, Lucktone, like immediately. And so I just took Lucky and Tony, put them together, and they're the namesake of my business. And every now and then, even friends don't realize the
connection.
Yeah. And they're like, "Oh, that's awesome!" Yeah, and it's pretty special to me to be able to kind of, as an ode to them.
Yeah.
How silly that may sound.
No.
They are big pieces of my wife and I's life, so they get to be the name of the business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what's your vision? What do you want to? So you have a few different paths here. You're thinking about getting more into. Would you ever do spec homes or mostly just remodels and stuff like that?
I think potentially. I mean, I have worked on spec home projects towards the end of them, right? Or I've worked with some builders that build spec homes, and I kind of move in. I like the idea of not having a client per se, so it could still be a remodel, but either a self-financed flip or have someone invest, but not doing it for, like, if you ask me, hey, remodel my home, well, then you're my client, and I'm kind of, otherwise I would like to kind of spearhead those jobs and get to make maybe not all the decisions, but work to my eye versus someone else's. So to answer your point, I could see myself down the road doing spec homes and GCing those. But those are pretty big headaches, and my passion is in the shop. Yeah,
because that's ultimately, that's the ultimate client job, right? A spec home.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not necessarily, right? Because you spec it and then you sell it, right?
Yeah, typically.
Right.
I mean, there may be some things at the end where if you sell it and before you close, then you customize certain things that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you are your client, your own client, and at the end of the day, you obviously want to make something that you're proud of, but you get to make the call. Makes sense. So like I said, I could see myself doing that, but then that gets me out of the shop more and more. And that's where I feel like I, thrive, if you will.
Makes sense.
And just enjoy that the most.
Cool.
So but I do think, cause I miss having coworkers. I miss, being in an office, right? So like doing things like this, and that's why I'm up at Fine Lumber a lot, because those people are great up there, but they're also like my coworkers in a sense.
Human interaction.
And it's something. It was really tough at the beginning of being laid off and doing it on my own. That was probably the toughest part, was losing that interaction.
Makes sense.
I'm a pretty social guy, so I missed that, and I've figured it out, and I'm a lot better at it now. But that's the one thing about being in the shop all the time, is you lose that.
Yeah.
So
makes sense. Where can people find you? If people are interested in working with you, do you work mostly with people here in Central Texas, or do you work with clients nationwide? How does that work?
It's mostly local, local Central Texas, Austin Metro. I'll drive out. I've got a client near Killeen right now, which is about an hour away, and but I do most of the work here. I've had to go out there anyway. So I mostly work locally. I've got a Houston client, but you can find Lucktone, Lucktone, woodshop.com is my website. I try to keep my Instagram going, and that's Lucktone Woodshop, at Lucktone Woodshop. And I also have a Facebook page, but I just, share from Instagram to Facebook. So I don't really keep up with that. But those are, and it's got my contact info on there. And if anyone just sends me an email or shoots me a message on Instagram or Facebook, I'm pretty good about responding, and then if we can make it work, and it sounds like something that's basically how I get all of my business is word of mouth and
awesome
through that sort of thing.
Sounds good. Britton Byfield, best of luck to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share your story, and look forward to following your progress.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Rock and roll.
Cheers.
Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America, and this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.